Hi guys, welcome back. So I got another interview today with Stephen from A Witch's Path, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. So if you guys don't know him, here he is, and I will just let him do that bit. It's always fun.
Hi, I am terrible at introductions, which is something about me. I've been running A Witch's Path, the page. I started it in 2017, I think, in November. Before I was mostly just practicing with friends and family growing up. Started practicing quite young. So I've been practicing nearly 22 years now. I don't really tend to describe my past too much. I call myself just a witch. I know that seems a bit taboo nowadays, just to be a witch. But yeah, so that's really how I describe myself. Tend to be a mixture of like a little bit of family stuff, a little bit of stuff I've picked along the way. And I started delving into the online stuff nearly 3 years ago, mostly because I just wanted to connect to more people. I saw a little documentary on, I think it was Channel 4, and that's the first time I ever heard the phrase like hashtag witches of Instagram. And I was thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to try that. I'm going to do that. And yeah, it blew up completely, and I'm really blessed for that. But yeah, and that's me, really. That's my terrible introduction. There you go.
I hate them too. I hate it when people are like, introduce yourself, and I'm like, oh no.
I am human.
This is me, and this is what I do. Yeah. For anybody interested, I will put the links down below to your Instagram page. You do run a store page as well, but that's on hiatus right now, right? That's correct?
Yeah, just because of all the COVID stuff.
Yeah. But you can go and you can check out A Witch's Path on Instagram, which is where we connected. And I enjoy Instagram, I have to say. We're going to be talking about some of the different ways in which witchcraft kind of, we have two topics, we're going to kind of merge them sort of, where we're going to talk a little bit about social media's role in witchcraft, and then we've got some like cursing elements coming into that too, because basically Stephen's been researching into TikTok. Like, he's been on the front lines having to look at that, and I was like,
That sounds like I'm in a war.
You're not when you go onto TikTok. Woo. I've had I've kind of been skirting the edges of TikTok because it just seems massively negative every time. I'm like, okay, I'll have a look at, and everyone's having witch wars, and now people are going on about racist stuff, and now people are making fun of autistic people. I'm like, what is going on TikTok? I guess because it's not governed very well. They don't have their rules and regulations.
I feels like it's largely unmoderated.
Yeah.
Is what it feels like.
Yeah. So what did you discover in your hunt through TikTok?
Well, I am not gonna lie, I feel I'm usually like a grumpy old man, so it did feel a bit like I was out of my depth in terms of age, as in a long way away. I did feel like the average age is it's more of a teenager thing, I think, overall TikTok. Although there are plenty of like older people on it. I think it depends on what you want to look at, because I think there's like all those little dance videos, because I know when I'm around my friends or I'm looking after their kids, like we do that. I first came into contact with TikTok because I got forced to do many dance routines in the living room. But I specifically focused on what I recently discovered is called WitchTok. So I had no idea. Well, to be fair, this is how bad I am at technology. I had to ask somebody how to find WitchTok, because I was actually genuinely looking for like forums or like spaces within, and I was like, how am I supposed to find this? But then apparently you just type in WitchTok and there it is. That's all you have to do, actually. Just seemed a bit silly that I spent ages looking, and then got frustrated and deleted the app, and then re-downloaded it when somebody taught me how to find it. So yeah, so I think it's been a bit of a hot topic, hasn't it, WitchTok? In terms of, I know you've spoken about it in a few
Yeah.
videos. I know you have some feelings.
Some feelings.
Some feelings. I think I found it interesting. Like I've been trying to look at it with the approach of one, a beginner, like a newcomer to the craft. I know people call them baby witches. Some people don't like that term, so I don't know if I really want to use that too much. But
it is a hashtag on TikTok for anybody who
is
there. Yeah.
So yeah, like and I'm trying to look at it from the perspective of a beginner, but also I'm trying to look from how I felt about the craft and what I was doing at that same age. Because a lot of the videos I saw, a lot of them are like maybe 15, 16, 17. Some people might be a bit younger in the comments, and there's also a few people who are maybe in their 30s and 40s, late 20s, producing content on WitchTok as well. Now, I think one of the conclusions I came to, that the videos are very short, so it looks as though like you screenshot them. So like they'll put up text and you have to screenshot that. I think one of the things that I consider is that I feel like a minute may be a bit too short of a video on a subject, on any subject, or if you think about something that's maybe really accessible for someone new to the craft, and something you would use like over the course of your craft, you know, something like candle magic, something that a lot of people use to like just ease themselves in. I still don't think you could cover that in a minute, you know. I think the people will make videos that are like an hour long about an introduction to candle magic. You can buy entire books on candle magic, and that to me is a bit of a disconnect in terms of the length of time. But then there were people who massively criticized the Instagram generation of witches. I know that that's a critique that I've got. And there were people who criticized the Facebook generation of witches. You know, and you look back again, and there were people that criticized the kind of 80s and 90s Cunningham, Silver Ravenwolf generation of witches. So like I don't know if what we're seeing in terms of people's feelings towards WitchTok is actually new, because I feel like we have this every like decade or two. We have this, something new happened, and there's this kind of almost like unspoken or very highly spoken war between like two sides of people that kind of will think about their own tradition or the way they were raised in the craft, and criticize the way someone newer has approached it. You know, quite frequently. I still have concerns about a minute. I just don't think I ramble. I talk so much. You need entrance to talk your ear off. So a minute just wouldn't be long enough to me to do anything. I find the clip of Instagram really jarring. Even if it's characters or something.
Yeah,
I don't know what's that.
Yeah, the minute thing. And the other thing is, people don't actually like the minute videos on TikTok. People prefer like the 15-second videos on TikTok, because most of like the music clips are 15 seconds or under. So if you're trying to do a video with like a music background, then it can be really hard to find like a minute background music to put in the background of your thing. So they're not even that popular, because I had an experiment with it, and I was like, I will see if I can explain how to do a simple spell in one of the 1 minute videos where you're just showing this bit, this bit, this bit, this bit. But it's so hard, because I'm exactly the same. I like to actually get into a subject. I like to talk about a subject. I like to like really, and I'm like, what can I say in a minute that kind of sums anything up? And then it kind of puts me off in a different way, because then you're trying to condense it all into a minute, and then you get very frustrated with the idea of like you've only got 60 seconds to try and explain something, and I can't do it either. So I have different concerns with it, though. I understand some of the concerns that cross over. The lack of attention span thing, I think, is definitely something that crosses over. That's something that got thrown at Instagram as well, though. Like, people were only interested in the aesthetic was the big one, I think, for Instagram. And it wasn't giving any depth.
Cool.
So I
would
just say for everybody, we had tech problems around here. So this will be edited, and you guys won't see it, but we were just, we were hit by the TikTok curse.
Yeah, it's brutal. About anything like it.
So this is one of the issues that I have with TikTok. Do you want to explain what the TikTok curse is to?
Well, to be fair, I don't know the ins and outs, because there's only I know that there was a curse that was put, that somebody apparently cast on WitchTok, to WitchTok, like the greater WitchTok, or at least the most recognized or well-known members of that community. Because I kept seeing videos of people saying it wasn't me, I didn't do the TikTok curse, and I was really confused, because I didn't know actually about the TikTok curse until I saw it on an Instagram post of somebody turning around and being like, I'm sending the curse right back. And I was a bit confused about it. And, I then saw a post. Do you know Temperance Alden, Wild Woman Witchcraft? Yeah, she did a post on like the cancel culture. A lot of that was that she found was coming from WitchTok. I spoke a little bit about curses with her recently. I put up a post about curses. I was like, that's what the one you saw. I was like, I don't know who needs to hear this, but you're probably not cursed. I don't know about you, but it's a message that I get a lot of people thinking they're cursed.
Yeah.
And from what I can see on the witch talks, I'm just every time I talk about it, I just sound old.
I was going to say, we sound so old. This newfangled technology, god damn it.
I know, I just don't get it. I don't even understand what we're doing now. It's a magic box and your face is in it, all right? So but yeah, like I was very confused about this cast, because there was an element of it that just felt a little bit playground, and I immediately started criticizing it in my head. But then I actually thought to myself, well, a lot of these people are quite young, so it's not out of the ordinary for young people to act like young people. I don't think there's an insult in that. You know, like, if it wasn't a curse, it would be gossip, or it would be something else. We were all guilty of that when we were kids. You know, we used to gossip at school. We used to like start rumors and things like that. And I'm like, this is the same thing, but it's just they're all witches. So
well, I don't know. You still see that with like people who are not kids, sadly. But there was an element to the TikTok stuff, which is some people got into a lot of trouble for talking to underage kids, and
really?
Yeah, and that was in the WitchTok community. And I don't think they were. I mean, supposedly the whole paedophile side of it is well known, that's an issue on TikTok. I don't think it was that. I think it was just that somebody had given spiritual advice to somebody who's very young, and the parents found out about it, and it was a whole issue. So then a lot of people won't respond to people unless they're 18 or over on there as a result. So I know that was a problem on there, because that was very difficult to gauge as well, because I think if people don't necessarily make videos, you might not know how old they are on there.
I know it sounds creepy. Well, I mean, this was another point, and I was actually discussing this earlier. It's the under 18 thing. Now, on one element, I was talking earlier, and I was like, I might sound like a hypocrite because I started practicing when I was really young. But then at the same time, that was something that was okay to do in my situation. And if it wasn't, I probably wouldn't have started practicing until I'd left home. You know, if I started practicing at all, if I hadn't had fear put in me. But I make it a point, and have done since I started on Instagram, that I do not give advice about this subject in like DMs to anyone under the age of 18. And I'm really, really strict on that. Sometimes there's a confusing gray area because you really have to like look at someone's profile and you're like, there's no pictures of you, I don't have any idea. And so I tend to have a little quick reply, because I have like a creative account set up, so I can have saved like quick replies, and my quick reply is like, thanks for reaching out, can you just let me know how old you are, thanks so much, I'll speak soon. And if they say, you know, if they're upfront and they're like, oh yeah, I'm 16 or I'm 17, I'm like, I'm really sorry, but as a safeguarding method that I've put in place, I don't give advice to under 18s on this subject, but good luck on your journey. Because I definitely don't want angry parents in my inbox. And I don't want to get in trouble for that. Because I do think it's a subject that when you really delve into it and you go beyond what maybe a newcomer to the craft is practicing, you know, when they first start out, you can pick up some really intense books and go onto some really intense sites about all kinds of types of magic, all kinds of types of practice, all ways of like mastering and gaining power that there are a bit darker, that do involve like sex and things like that. And I avoid those subjects too on my page, because there's a certain element where I have like a trust in parents that they're monitoring whatever their kids are following and looking at. And that's not my business, you know. So my account's public, so anyone can see it, but I won't bring up subjects like that. And I definitely won't even take them to DM. And sometimes if I don't feel comfortable with a message, I will just not continue with it, even if they are over the age of 18. I'm very strict on like, no, you're blocked, you know, that you're being inappropriate. Because you do get some inappropriate messages, or some angry messages, or some downright ignorant messages. But I think that's also the trouble with TikTok, because I was looking at the WitchToks, and some of the videos actually seem like they could go somewhere. Like, I'm like, that's kind of good, I like that. But you scroll through the comments, because I'm like, oh, I was just curious, like, oh, what are people saying about this video, like how are people interacting with it? And a lot of the comments go unanswered. So a lot of people are like, oh, I want to start out, how do I start out? Or, you know, I've just got myself some amethyst, how do I use it? All of those little tiny questions. And so what you were saying earlier about linking in the 15-second videos and things like that, and we're in a kind of age where everything is so instantly consumable. And a lot of the questions I get in my inbox, whether that's someone who's, you know, new or not new to the craft, but mostly around the starting out questions, people are wanting to know how to go from A to Z in like one DM. You know, I can send them one message and that will take them from where they are now to full-blown initiated high priestess, all that malark. And by the next day they'll be casting all the kinds of spells and doing all the kinds of things. And people genuinely are a bit shocked when I tell them that I can't do that for them, you know, and I can't condense what it is that I've learned or what's in a book that might be on the subject they're asking about into a DM. And you know, and even when I tell people that, sometimes they turn around, and I've had so many requests of people being like, can you just send me the book you have? Or can you scan the book and send me a PDF of it? And I'm like, no, I can't. Of course I can't do that. But I think that's what we're seeing on the TikTok as well. So like, you've got, you know, these young ones and newcomers to the craft. They want to go from A to Z. And because, you know, the spirituality is trending, witchcraft is trending. When something's trending, if something's trendy, it's something you can pick up and put down. You know, fashion is trend. You know, like you get a new outfit that's fashionable. You can put that on, you can take it off. People will associate something with trending as something you can just put on and take off. But that's not how you would use witchcraft. That's not how you learn it. So I think that's something too. And I think where I might be hypocritical is that, you know, I'm looking at these messages and being like, nobody's answering them. Some were answered, but like, I'm looking at these messages and being like, nobody's helping these people. But at the same time, I'm not helping these people because they're under 18. So it's like a catch-22.
It's difficult. I mean, I have that with YouTube. On YouTube, I have to, you know, I've put that it is for adults because it is. And have stated a number of times, you know, that it's meant for adults, and most of these topics are more difficult for adults and things. And then I have to kind of leave it in the care of the parents that are monitoring YouTube at that point, because that's all I can do. But there's some really interesting points in what you said. I think the idea of what is disposable is perhaps where the backlash comes from with all of these, not just TikTok, like all, like the Instagram and Facebook before it, and YouTube as well back in the day, that people are afraid that something that matters so much to them is going to then become disposable, and like people are going to treat it like it's disposable. And I'm always like, well, you can't control what other people are going to do regardless. So like, you can't control whether somebody finds it disposable or not. And I tend to think of most of these things being good portals to opening doors to people who are interested. I don't know how much of, because of the shortness of TikTok, I don't know if you can really get your teeth in the same way though that you could, because on Instagram, for example, you can get the longer videos now, which is good. And also you can like find an image, and then you can go through a whole load of images usually on somebody's page, or get a good feel of what they're about. And then if it's a video like this, you can watch hours and hours and hours of it if you want, and so you can get your teeth in. But if TikTok doesn't feel that way, I think TikTok of everything feels the most disposable to me, because of how short everything is, because of how quick and on to the next thing and on to the next thing and on to the next thing it feels. It really plays on that lack of attention, and to the point where like YouTube advice this year is like, if you want your videos to be popular, they have to be short. Like 2 minutes or under, and I'm like, I can't. I can't do it.
Well, I'm like that with character limits. I always do my best to try and fill the whole character limit of a post when I'm on Insta, and then now I'm like making Patreon because I'm not happy with that character limit, and I want to put more in, but I also want to attract the right kind of people that want to be around that energy, and you know, that I can learn from me, all of that kind of like stuff. And I think you're definitely right about it being the most disposable. I think that it might be a good way to maybe signpost a channel. You know, you could put up a quick bit of a video and be like, hey, I just posted a video on blah, blah, blah.
Advertising basically.
I think it's good for dance routines and pranks and things like that, and for things that are really funny, because you know, on normal TikTok, I should stop calling it the TikTok, but on normal TikTok, there was some hilarious things that I was like, I could lose 8 hours of my day watching these hilarious videos because they're so funny. And you know, but when it came to, I think that the WitchTok side of things felt so much more serious than normal TikTok, because normal TikTok just felt quite light and airy, and you know, here's me and my gran dancing together. And whereas WitchTok felt like people were really like, I think that maybe what we're seeing is some people who like, I feel really comfortable with this platform. How do I make it my own? Maybe Instagram wasn't for them. Maybe a Facebook group wasn't for them. But they feel really comfortable making something like that. One thing I did find curious is that I think that, and this isn't a read or an insult at them. Like this is just, I think that I don't know about you, but there comes a point in your practice where you get like maybe like a couple of years in, and you think, you know what, I know so much now. I know a lot. I know so much more now than I did then. And you think that you know, there's a lot more that you're ready for. And then you get like another couple of years down, you'd be like, I didn't know anything. I really didn't know anything. And then you get a couple more years down the line, and you're like, still didn't know anything. And I constantly wake up being like, you know, I don't know enough about that. I'm going to learn some more about that. And what I do see is that there's probably some people on there that have maybe got to that couple of year point and thought, I know enough to start teaching the whole subject of witchcraft. But also the wider issue there is that a lot of the books that are coming out that are just kind of like shoved through the system are not all encompassing books on the craft. You know, some of them I wouldn't even say are a decent beginner's guide. And I do a lot of like book reviews, and a lot of book reviews I do just don't make the pile, because I'm like, I just don't think I can say anything nice about this. you know, and I
There's been
think, you know,
fake ones though, hasn't there? There's been like recently, there's been like it's been uncovered that these people aren't Wiccans, they aren't witches, and they're putting out books on these things, and it's basically a cash grab, and it's basically regurgitating other 101 books. Because I was
yeah,
talking to Thorne about this, and I think this is one of the areas that you felt this that crossed over, that there wasn't anything deeper and meatier in books a lot of the time. It was really difficult, and that's because a lot of people are either comfortable at that level. Like, I think there may be an energy of some people don't want to commit the time and effort and energy to go deeper than that couple of year journey that they've been on, and that's not a criticism. Like, if that's where they're at, that's where they're comfortable, and that's what works for them, then, you know, that's fine. And maybe some of that has gone onto platforms like TikTok and stuff, that they feel like, I'm hesitant to say this, but like, I think there is a difference in mindset for a lot of people. Like, I agree with you. Like, you're always learning, you're always on this journey, you're always discovering. I sometimes get overwhelmed by this amount of stuff that I don't know. And I have moments of like, oh my God, there are all these things in life that I'm even within spirituality that I'm never going to fully understand in this lifetime. Like, it's sometimes mind blowing to me. But you commit to the journey, you commit to the learning, the understanding, getting your hands on whatever you can. And then I think there are people who are comfortable at that level where they know, it's not even that they know enough, it's not, they might know quite a bit, but they feel comfortable at that level, and then maybe they want to teach at that level, and it comes off as this is all there is.
Yeah, I think you're bang on there.
And it's not all there is. It's just getting to more information is hard, and you also get to this point where a lot of it then becomes personal gnosis and personal experiences. And for me, I reached a point where there was some of it that was so personal, I didn't want to share that, because it's just way too personal to make videos on it, especially like 15-second videos on like some of the deep inner workings of your mind or your heart and soul and things. And like, to the point where the Morrigan altar now doesn't go on YouTube, because it's reached a point where, like, I used to show little altars and what I was doing, and fun little things, and I might still show, like, I have the working altar up. Oh yeah, I have the background on so people can't see, sorry, but I have the working altar like up here, and that's just a fun, playful little altar, so I have that on display sometimes. But the Morrigan altar, it's reached a point where it's really personal, and there's things people would argue about, like I have bones and things on there, and people will argue about that with you, and I'm like, that's not open to discussion, because it's personal and it means something to me. So you do hit an interesting wall as a content creator, where you're like, how do I continue sharing content which is where I'm at and discussing things around where I'm at, but not sharing the things that I don't feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah.
And so I wonder if they're just, I mean, there is a deluge of the 101 stuff anyway. That's what sells. That's what Thorne was saying, you know, that has a bigger market, because there are more people interested in getting to know it, and especially because some of them aren't going to carry it on, but they're interested in the beginning bit. So yeah, that's something that is interesting, and I think that kind of flavors things like TikTok. I think for Instagram, for me, it was the aesthetic, which is the big argument that I saw about Instagram, that people were just posting images without context, without depth, or they were posting images to look, you know, trendy, fashionable, whatever it is. She says, having painted her face with all the little markings and stuff today. Hi, Instagram. But I'm a fan of the playing with aesthetics anyway. Could be a Taurus moon, definitely a Taurus moon element of my natal chart, but it's also, I find there is power in it, and I think that some of the arguments took away from Instagram a little bit, because they're like, oh, it's just aesthetic, and it's like, but aesthetic can be powerful. Like, that's what color magic is. That's what like symbols do. They tap into that there's something beyond the scribble, right? So
I think that that's a critique I've had a lot in terms of my page. I did post a little bit of a rant about it the other day. I've started to get a bit more ranty nowadays on Instagram, and I don't know whether that's just age.
Is this grumpy
or
old man again?
it's just me being grumpy old man. Everyone who knows me will tell you I'm a grumpy old man. Very, very grumpy. And I posted a little rant because I think that what's strange to me, what felt like there was a bit of a contradiction, is that, I mean, my background is art all the way, like art from when I was like 4 years old all the way to university. You know, I got a degree in commercial photography, and I have a background in things like fine art as well, and graphic design. So for me, Instagram was a language I understood, and for me to put something on there, I was like, well, I am going to make it look pretty, because this, you know, I want to find a balance between creating the mood with the picture and the lighting and the energy in that image that resonates with the people, so that they'll stop and then they'll read it. You know, some people don't read it, some people just like it. That's fine if that's what they want to do. But I try and match the two, so that the picture kind of follows what I'm going to write about. And so subtly you can pick up the themes, so you know that what different, like different kind of posts I've got going on. So I might have, you know, things on tarot going on, things on runes going on. Sometimes I've had those, but you can pick that up in the feed, and that's like something I do deliberately, so you can scroll through and you're like, oh, that's one of the tarot posts, oh, that's one of the rune posts. And I have faced some critique over the years I've been on Instagram, that, you know, I'm just purely an aesthetic witch. And it felt really odd to me to hear that. It was almost as if being on Instagram negated the 18 years prior to that I practiced before joining Instagram. And that felt really odd to me. But also it probably like served as a bit of a hook to get people a bit more interested in things that they were already interested in, and to actually stop and read something about it that maybe they wouldn't have read before, because there's a lot of accounts that are just imagery, like you say. And, you know, the caption could be like, I really love this quartz cluster. But then you could see another post with a nice picture of quartz and be like, here's some properties of quartz. You know, and there's a difference. And whatever people want to consume is up to them. Like, it's absolutely fine if you just want to post a lovely picture and say, I love this picture. That's fine. But I didn't understand where the critique was coming from, because if I was to be a painter, and I posted a picture of a painting, which is still playing with color, playing with light, you know, being creative, the same as you would with a picture. But the same people that would criticize the people who are like aesthetic witches would look at someone's artwork and be like, that's a gorgeous painting, that really resonates, I can feel that. And they'll, you know, and they can read the caption. And I didn't see a difference personally between photography and, say, that fine art, or that, you know, that canvas, that poem, because it's all art to me, and photography is art in itself. So I think that's a debate, wider debate as well, especially with a lot of the books coming out. I find that people are in two minds. They either criticize a book for being really pretty to look at, or they praise it. So if the book is good, and the general consensus is that it's a great book, people will praise the artwork. If the general consensus of a book is that it's bad, then people will say, oh, you obviously knew that it was going to be bad. Look how pretty they made the cover, because it's Instagrammable, like it's an Instagram cover. I keep hearing people like throw around Instagrammable in terms of books that are being sold. And I don't understand that either, because if you know, you know, if you're in a bookshop, how are they supposed to sell their books? You know, if there's not something that draws you over to it. You don't get loads of people just walking around bookshops blind, like trying to psychically divine which book to buy. So there has to be something that draws you in. That again feels like a little debate.
It's interesting because obviously I work with physical products that I sell on a store for a witch store, right? So I completely understand what you're saying about the image telling a story, because that's exactly what I do with physical products. So on, say, for example, the aura sprays, right? They technically all look the same because they're all in the same amber bottle with the same sticker on the front, and then it's just got its name on it. That doesn't tell anybody anything about it if I just show 10 pictures of the same bottle. So the image has got to be lighting and color and certain flowers and certain crystals or certain imagery. So for example, the return to sender, Neath Corvid's wing, versus the Aphrodite one is insanely different. So the return to sender has got like crow claws and crow feathers and darker imagery, and like it has that vibe and that essence and that story, whereas the Aphrodite one is Aphrodite in a picture as much as I could manage it. And it has to infuse that into the image in a way, because that tells people a story before they've even begun to read the story. So I 100% understand and agree with that you said. I think the problem comes for people again is when they are worried that there's no substance behind what it is that they're looking at. And it happens because I've forgotten her name. I can't remember her name for the life of me, but there was an Instagram woman pretending to be a witch, and she was very Instagram famous, and I think she had a pink wig, and she was like selling jewelry that was meant to be witch stuff, and it all turned out to be like bought in China, wasn't magical, it was just repurposed and sold for a huge markup price, and she was conning people. And so it happens, unfortunately, but it happens in every area of the world. It happens in everywhere. It's not just within spiritual circles. So I get the energy behind why people are worried about like there being no depth there, but at the same time it's like, well, you're almost saying that the art can't have depth, and that is a really weird analysis when you think that art changes the world. That art is the human soul on canvas, and you're just looking at it in different ways. Because if you can appreciate fine art from the Renaissance, you can understand why that has meaning and value, but then you can't see meaning and value in a modern portrayal of something, just because maybe it's not canvas and brush. Maybe you can't like switch over from canvas and brush to maybe photography. That's something about you rather than the art of the image, and that is a shadow maybe to work through or something like that.
I think I really love what you just said, and I think what it kind of highlights is something that I did speak about the other day on a post. Oh, and if I say the other day, it could mean any time between now and like 8 years ago. But I did do a post recently, in the grand scheme of things, that was talking about a golden age. Now, I studied English language for quite a while, and my English tutor used to say to me that a lot of historians, a lot of people who study language often think there's a golden age of language, and we don't have that anymore. Whereas there was so many amazing things about the way we develop language today that are often overlooked, not by everyone. Now, I think what we see with the craft is exactly the same mentality. So, you know, when we were talking earlier about the, you know, the you know, you've got the traditional witches, you've got then the people that came up through like the 50s and 60s, then you've got the kind of Cunningham era, for want of like a better word, but then it was the Ravenwolf, and then you have the more modern books now, and every single person before is going to struggle, I think. Not everyone, but I think it's a definite real struggle when you're talking about shadow and things, that there's something in their heart and in their chest and the feeling that they're thinking, but my generation is the golden age. Everyone's going to think that there was a golden age. I think it's a mentality that is in no way exclusive to the craft. It's, you know, other people will look at anything new and think, oh, but it was better in my day. You know, or
because they understood it better. I think they were tapped into that energy, and I wonder sometimes it's if the point at when you were the most excited for your craft, and that memory, that energy is sort of imprinted on that way of experiencing it. and so there's like that rose tinted glasses thing around that good vibe, that good feeling. And this is why, like, I don't want to completely dismiss TikTok, because I'm like, are we being golden age right now? Are we being snobby and like because possibly and I don't want to say that it has no merit, because I don't think that's fair either. I don't think that it's without merit, but I think it's not my preference, because I like to have deeper conversations, and I like to read, or I like to spend more time than a minute with it, I think. So that might be my preference more than anything, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that what I did see actually that I didn't mention earlier is that on some of them they had links to like Discord groups,
Yeah.
To continue the chat. I think that could be a great idea. I worry about Discord though. I think that it's again like a kind of almost like unmoderated platform. A lot of people can get in. I'm just thinking about that from like a cautious adult perspective, like be careful everyone, you know, like when MSN Messenger first came out, and you know all of our teachers were like, rah, be careful, you know. And but I think I did join a couple of chat groups and quickly left, not from TikTok, not from this bit, but like probably about a year ago everyone kept saying to join some chat groups, and I was like, yeah, all right, I probably have time for that, maybe I'll join one of those. And I introduced myself, and I immediately got somebody, a moderator, like telling me off, for because there was this rule as you entered, like an auto rule, and it was like, introduce yourself, let anyone know like your preferred name, let them know what your path is, and you know, a fact about yourself. And I was like, that's cool. So I was like, hi, I'm Stephen, and I either describe myself as like a witch or a hereditary witch. Although I'm not, I mean, hereditary in itself can mean so many different things. So, you know, it's a bit of it's not really telling anyone what you practice to say it, to be honest. But I was like, hi, I'm Stephen, I'm a hereditary witch, blah, 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 facts about myself. And I immediately got someone being like, we don't talk about hereditary witchcraft in here because it can make people upset if they haven't got any witch family. And I was like, okay, cool, I won't. And then someone in the chat was talking about some new things that they had bought. It might have been like crystals or a crystal rune set or something. And another moderator like swooped in and was like, we can't talk about things that we've recently bought in case people don't have the money to buy things. And almost every single thing that went on in the chat, there was like a moderator swooped in and told them not to say it. And the only people that really did speak were the moderators to themselves. And they kind of dictated the chat. And I think that's what you can get in some of these groups. So you can, like, it's quite easy in a group for like a hierarchy to form. And it's quite easy then for a newcomer to come into that group and think that that's the way things are. Like you said earlier, like people who are really comfortable in their lane, really comfortable with the level they're at. And that's absolutely fine. But then when they teach other people, they're teaching the same style as them. But it's not, you know, if someone came to me and wanted to learn more about, say, Wicca, I could signpost them in all different directions and say, well, if you want to learn more about like the traditional side of things, if you want to know more about the modern side of things, and here are some good resources. And I feel like for me personally, like it's nice to have at least a little bit of knowledge on a broad range of things in that sphere. So at least you can signpost people in a direction. And, you know, someone could ask me a question and be like, you know what, I have no idea, but actually this book is quite good. So that will help, and that will probably signpost some bits. And in a group chat, that can be a definite danger. But then I had that going online when I was a kid. When I first found like witchy groups online, probably Yahoo or MSN chat rooms or something like that. And there was some horrible, I didn't even know what the word gatekeeping meant back then. Like there were some horrible people. And, you know, I remember my uncle at one point before that had recommended I read The Key of Solomon. And at the time I was like 14, and I actually don't think that was a good recommendation because I went and did it.
A bit much,
yeah. But then I also went on these groups, and all of them said the same thing. They were like, well, you know, come back to us when you've read and understood the Key of Solomon, and then we'll help you. And I got that coming at me, and I was like, and you know, that book as a 14-year-old, I have to say, it did scar me a little bit. It made sense later on in life, but when I was that age, I was like, I don't think this is you know, appropriate reading material. But there we go. And I think that mentality carries on. But I think that on nowadays, I keep seeing the word gatekeeping get thrown around in the wrong way, and that again, I think is something you discussed before, and that's what we're seeing. And we're seeing people. I know I have a lot of friends in the community that are actively trying to fight against appropriation from closed traditions and things like that within the craft, because some of these trendy books and some of these trendy sources and some of these websites and some of these accounts are such a mixing pot, but it doesn't give any of those sources credit. Like, you know, they might include something to do with chakras, for example, or like they might talk about something like Reiki, but they'll include it all under the same, this is witchcraft. But then if people turn around and be like, well, maybe you need to talk about more of like Eastern mysticism, maybe you need to talk about, you know, the esotericism in that part of the world and how that developed, and, you know, maybe throwing a bit of Crowley in there, and you know, his visits to Asia, then people would turn around and be like, no, you're gatekeeping. Like, why are you gatekeeping? I'm allowed to use this. Like, I'm allowed to take this. And there's no wider discussion about, we need to be sourcing, we need to at least be recognizing where we're getting things from, to give them the appropriate respect, and see where and how they ended up in systems today. But, you know, sometimes it is a bit of a fear that, and especially within these communities and things like WitchTok, that I actively saw videos that were very much appropriative in terms of closed traditions. And I didn't want to make any assumptions about, you know, where these people were from, but it seemed quite clear to me that the way things were being pushed together just didn't feel right, didn't sit right with me. And it wasn't me being like coming at it from a gatekeeper mentality. It was me coming at I'm genuinely concerned for all of these closed practices, or all of these different practices, that they're not being celebrated appropriately, or, you know, quoted appropriately, or the sources are not being spoken about. And I think that's something that I've seen being quite lost recently. I don't know how you feel about that.
I have noticed this really weird, it's almost like gatekeeper is the ultimate insult, and then it gets thrown around for reasons that make no sense. And to me, if somebody's trying to encourage you to learn something, that's not gatekeeping. Because if somebody's saying, I want you to understand where this is from, I want you to honor the culture behind it, I want you to honor the history behind it, I want you to do some research, I want you to go deeper, that's not gatekeeping. That's not saying you're not allowed to learn this. That's saying learn it, but learn it like properly. Don't be like, this is my chakras and that's it. It's like, no, where does it come from? What's the deeper, where's the history? What is it built on? And that to me isn't gatekeeping. So when you see gatekeeping used against those people, it's like it's being touted like a slur, and it's wrong. Because it's not gatekeeping. There are people out there who try and limit people's experience. There are people out there who try and stop people from progressing for all sorts of weird reasons. Like the moderators that you mentioned, that's almost gatekeeping, because that's like the only people who are allowed to talk is us. You're not allowed to discuss things that we have decided for reasons beholden to us are the rules. And you can almost understand where the rules come from, but at the same time, it's not up to everybody else to feel like if they bought something and they're excited and they want to share it, right? You don't know how long they saved up for it. You don't know how hard they worked for it. It's not up to you to judge them for celebrating something. And if you're jealous because you can't afford it, that's nothing to do with them. That's yours to deal with and figure out and shadow work and fix, quote unquote. So those rules to me feel like just restrictive to the point of like people can't talk. People can't enjoy things, people can't celebrate. And there's a weird balance with all of these things, because I've noticed, like, I want to be sensitive to people, and their cultures, and respect their beliefs. And I absolutely, I'm behind that. And then there's this weird tilt the other way, where people are like, don't speak for, like, there's almost like a white people speaking for cultural people, and they're taking it way too far. Like, one example recently was, you know, white people telling other white people they couldn't celebrate Chinese New Year, and then the head of the Chinese government went on national TV and was like, no, celebrate it, we invite you to celebrate it, please do. And so there is that weird tip in both directions with it, because you should understand, you should research, you should honor where it came from. It's not just about taking things, and so it's a difficult discussion, because obviously I'm whiter than white bread, and I don't want to, you know, speak for anybody. I'd rather, like I said with Benabel, I'd rather be here. I'd like to stand with people, and that includes appropriation, even when it's nothing to do with what ethnicity you are. That can just be about where you're from. But then again, that can be a really slippery slope of a conversation to be had, because for me, I would never tell somebody who was an American, maybe, or, you know, whoever, you're not allowed to work with the Celtic deities because you're not Celtic. Like, I would never tell somebody that. And it's a really, you know, it's one of these conversations. It's really complicated, but I understand where some people are coming from when they gatekeep with regards to this. I hate that word term. They're trying to get you to respect them, I guess.
I think it's almost like the word spiritual now. The word spiritual seems a bit like redundant, and it seems a bit, what does it even mean? People throw it around all the time, and I throw the word all around. I'm like, spirituality, spiritual, and like, what does it mean nowadays? It's a strange thing to define. I think one of the things that you touched on was there was like an elitist aspect to a lot of things as well, and I think that comes with the whole gatekeeping, word that shall not be named aspect. And one thing that I think, I don't know what your opinion on this, I think that some of the things that I did see on the witch talks, and I have seen on YouTube, and I have seen on things, and some of them are just, it seemed a bit ridiculous to me, because, and I'm only saying it because of, I didn't really watch many of these videos, but I started getting a lot of messages about these videos, and it was more, there's a lot of material out there saying like 5 signs you're a witch, 10 signs you're a witch, all of these kind of things. I can see your face going. And to be fair, I've never really watched them, because in my mind I'm like, yeah, I'm a witch, so it's, I know I don't need to know what signs to look for. And you know, my first thought is when someone said, like, I saw a video, it's like 10 signs you're a witch, and I thought, are we going to be looking at moles on our body? Are we going to be finding witch marks? You know?
There is that. I went on TikTok yesterday, and I was like, I'll just have a quick look to like refresh myself before this video, right? And there is, have you got a witch tag? And people are showing like a wart or a skin tag at different parts of their bodies, and that proves they're a real witch. And I was like, that's enough TikTok for me today.
I've said that to myself several times, but one thing that I put on my Twitter, because I've actually started ranting quite a lot on my Twitter, and because apparently that's what Twitter's for, and I've only recently joined, but I joined it so I could do little quotes for my page, and then I just found loads of really interesting rants, and I was like, this is great, and you can just get lost in a Twitter hole of rant. But one thing that I do consider it is a bit elitist in itself, because we're just talking about like being elitist, like, so the messages that I get are people being like, oh, so I don't really know much about the moon, and I'm not really that drawn to it, but so does that mean I can't be a witch because this video told me I had to love the moon, or this video told me I had to love nature, but I actually live in a city? so I can't be a witch. And what these videos do more than anything is they actually stop people's progress. In my opinion, I watched quite a few of them. Some of them have some lovely advice in between things, but, and I think it's the thing with crystals as well. Crystals is a big one, because almost everyone in this video is being like, you love crystals, you're drawn to crystals, you're drawn to working with them, you own some. And I love crystals, don't get me wrong, I'm a junkie for rocks, but I've always had like a passion for geology as a kid. Like I used to go fossil hunting. I used to find gemstones. I used to, you know, like take them home, shape them and all that kind of business. And that I never actually connected that to my craft ever, really. And then when, you know, it took me a long time to learn about like crystal healing, for example, and actually using them for something, because I was just like, these are great and they come from the earth and they're really special. And, you know, this one has a density of blah, blah, blah. And when I see people turning around and being like, well, you have to love crystals to be a witch, or you have to, you know, love nature to be a witch, I honestly, it really gets me going. And maybe that's me like gatekeeping, I don't know, but I actually think that would, if I look at that from like a beginning point of view, and I'm like a 12-year-old watching a video, and I just kind of started formally practicing, and I'm seeing this video being like, you need to be drawn to this, and I wasn't, I'd be like, oh, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not a witch. Maybe I just stop. This is all stupid fantasy. I should just not explore that anymore. And I just think they're a bit ridiculous. It's the same with like people are bringing a lot of fantasy in it. So like there's so much fantasy on Tumblr in terms of like fan fictions, you know, role plays, and none of that's bad. Like there's some amazing fan fictions of things. There's some amazing role plays. There's amazing like RPG stuff on Tumblr, and a lot of them involve kind of like creatures like your elves and your witches and things like that. And so somewhere along the line, I found that some of those things have actually been caught up in some of the genuine like witchcraft practice, kind of merged a little bit. And then I get messages again being like saying things, asking if they can be X kind of witch, and, you know, have I got the key to the spell that they need and things. And I look at what they're sourcing, and it's actually like part of a really beautifully written fiction that was never intended for somebody to take seriously as anything to do with witchcraft. It was just a lovely piece of fiction that's ended up on a witchcraft site somehow because of people sharing things. And that's something I'm seeing. And I'm seeing people, loads of questions recently being like, hi, you know, I'm new to witchcraft. I'm an Aries, so how do I decorate my altar? And I'm just like, and that's like a question that I recently got, and questions, and a lot of them are now starting to be about astrology based, like, what kind of witch am I if I'm a Taurus?
Yeah,
I'm like,
that happens though because of those sheets, which are like, if you're a Taurus, you're a this witch. And I hate them because like I'm a Virgo, so everything with Virgo is awful. You're a Virgo, so you're a hermit. I'm like, okay. But that's the oversimplification stuff that you find, and they're meant to be fun. Like, oh, which am I? Because I'm this star sign. They're meant to be fun. They're not meant to really be taken seriously. But that is interesting that the sharing of those can have an impact. That's not actually something I thought about, because to me those are just silly, and that's maybe that needs to be on the posts when we do share those sorts of things. Like, this is just for fun. Thinking about it, I do put that on most of them that are like that. I don't think it's gatekeeping with the real signs of what a real witch is, because that sort of thing drives me up the wall. I've been writing about the real witch stuff for a very long time, and I'm like, it drives me crazy. Because it can go from well-intentioned but misguided to just flat out gatekeeping to really insidious, because people sneak things in sometimes to those sorts of things, like, you can't be this kind of witch if you're not this, and this bordering, like, I had this sweet guy, and I will never forget him until the end of my days, because somebody had told him he couldn't work with the Morrigan because he was gay, and I was horrified. And I remember that I was moving house, and I was like, I'm gonna need an hour to stop stopped what we're doing because I need to make a video for this guy right now, because somebody had basically told him that that was against him being a real son of the Morrigan, and he couldn't work with this day. And I was like, hell no, we are not having that. Like, no, I like exploded. I was like, no, this is not okay. And so it can, like, the well-intentioned ones are, I often feel like it's crowd fodder because they do well. Those kinds of videos and blog posts and things, they, like, people consume them like crazy, like the top 5 things that say I'm a witch, and it piques people's interest because they're like, oh, am I a witch, am I, you know, and people who are witches are like, right, how realistic is this then? So they have that dazzle factor, I think. And then again, the same way the 101 stuff does, reaching a wider mass of people, that, like, the beginners 5 steps showing you're a witch has a wider range again, so you can get more eyes on it, that sort of thing. But generally I hate them. I absolutely hate those sorts of things because it is putting people in boxes that they don't need to be put in. It shallows it. It doesn't usually convey any kind of depth. Like, the idea that you like nature even is such a shallow way of saying it, because that's not how people, they're not like, yes, I like the trees, and I like the grass, and I like the butterflies, I'm a witch. It's like, no, people go out into nature and they feel connected with something sacred. They have a feeling that they can't maybe put into words. They can sense energies beyond themselves. They might be animists. They feel something moving them when they're out in nature. They connect to it. They connect to the cycles. They feel more grounded. They feel magic. They feel that there's something just out of sight that they can't quite understand yet. It's not that they go out there and, you like nature. And even if you don't, that doesn't mean that you're not a witch. That's the other thing. Like, this idea you have to be either or, and there's a yes, no, and ugh, I'm ranting.
But I think you're definitely right there. I'm just trying to get this, like, light balance right, because otherwise I'm going to look really spooky, like it's a Goosebumps special.
You're going to look like a terrifying old man.
Yeah, I should start speaking like really British, because all the scary people in horror films are British, right?
Well, I speak really British, so I must be terrifying. Yeah.
I originally come from near London, so I have a bit of an accent in that respect. But I also think those kind of videos, and again, this applies to, like, the WitchTok, because there are a couple of things that I saw, and I think one video was like things I wished I knew as a baby witch. I think that was what it was called. And I'm not going to name drop or anything like that, but I think the things in that video, one of the things that stood out to me was, did you know that you can use sound to cleanse? And that confused me a little bit. And it was more because I was like, I wasn't criticizing the person. In my mind, I was criticizing the resources that are more made commonly available, because something like that feels to me quite basic in terms of, like, cleansing. When you're learning about cleansing, if you've got a decent book in front of you to talk about cleansing, they'll talk about, you know, your smoke cleansing, sound cleansing, you know, dancing, breath, all, you know, just simply intention. They'll go over all these different kinds. They'll name several instruments. They'll talk about different incense blends, and that feels like on a very basic level. And to me, in terms of the resources that maybe I was looking at growing up, and so it concerned me in the respect that I looked back on it and I'm like, if this video is things I wished I knew as a baby witch, then what were those resources then? You know, and I feel like a lot of people that message me are not buying any books at all. Like, I get a lot of people who don't want to buy books, and I don't want to say, I'm a big believer in, like, thrifty witchcraft, massively. I've gone around before for friends who are maybe starting out and they wanted help setting up, like, an altar or a sacred space in any way, shape or form, or to get some tools, because I really love tools personally. Like, sometimes it's just me and a candle, but sometimes it's me with every single wand I have, just throwing it about, juggling in the air. So I have a large collection of tools, but also I tell people that has taken me like 2 decades to collect all of that or make all of it. So that's something you really need to take into account. But I will go around every single charity shop in my area and find things. I'll be like, right, this chopping board, you know, let's paint it. Let's you know, etch into it. You can that can be an altar. You know, charity shops are a gold mine for things like chalices. You can get old metal cups, you know, even onyx ones, you know, glass ones, crystal ones, all the things. They just have it in there. Like all this kind of lovely furniture and things from like the 70s and 80s that you can find in like a charity shop can definitely be upcycled and repurposed. And you can get a whole altar kit for like 20 quid from just going around the charity shops. And so I'm massively, I don't want to cut anyone off and say, this is such an elite club that you need to be able to buy 12, 15, 30 books. You know, all you really need to start out with is like 1 or 2 good solid books and resources. And you know, and I remember I was talking earlier about how, because I was running through what I was going to think about for this video, and I was talking about how I started out in a way, and I had a group of friends that I practiced with growing up, and we found 3 books that we liked and the looks of, and we were maybe like 13 or 14 at this point, and I'd been practicing for a little while. They'd been practicing for a little while, but it was mostly like kind of for them it may be things that they'd read in like a magazine or something, like the Mind Body Spirit or whatever the equivalent was back then. I think that was still running, to be fair.
I think so, yeah.
You know, I had a couple of books, but then most of it was more like word of mouth from like family stuff. So we put together like a plan, because we're all broke, because we're all kids, right? So we were just like, right, let's pick 3 books. Let's go to Ottokar's, was the bookstore in our town. We'll go to Ottokar's, became Waterstones in the end. We'll have a little look. We each pick a book that we all like, and we'll each save up for that book, and then we'll read them and swap and read them and swap and read them and swap. And we go around each other's houses and share what we learned, and then practice and exercise from the book. I don't know if you've ever read Kate West's A Real Witch's Craft.
I have, yeah.
Right. That I was obsessed with that book when I was a kid. Absolutely obsessed, because everything, there was so many practical, it was almost like a workbook of practical things, even things like, you know, the techniques that I don't see a lot written about, like say like your astral temple, for example, and working on the astral in your work. And you know, it took me and my best friend growing up like a whole year of practicing. We picked an exercise a week, and we did it a couple of times that week. And then the next week we were like, right, do we feel ready for the next one? Yep, let's go for it. Let's try invoking that element. Let's do this little, and we'll tweak it, and we'll make this work for us, and we'll add this in, or we'll take this out. But we'll try it as is first. And that's the thing, like that was so, I can't ever get that time back, because it was so beautiful, and I always look back on it with fond memories. But again, with the culture now, it's take me from A to Z, and I'm not seeing people have that same excitement as often, that they're gonna, you know, go out and get that one special book, work through it, and they're gonna take like a good solid year working through that. Loads of decent books, I would say, you can take years working through them. You can take years.
And people go back as well, that's probably worth mentioning, that people go back to the beginner books just to refresh themselves sometimes, because you can get into bad habits and stuff with your craft, and sometimes it can be really refreshing to go back to those earlier books and like refresh your memory on things and things you might have forgotten.
That's too bright. Hold on. I'm going to temporarily pick you up and take you over to the light.
We're going on a journey.
We're going on a journey. There we go. You can just edit that light switch bit out.
I'm leaving that in.
Or not, yeah. Well, I was getting a bit annoyed. at it. There you go. I think you're right. And, you know, that's something that I think Thorn was talking about in a video once, actually. I love Thorn's channel so much. I love just listening to her talk. And yeah, I think that's what maybe we're lacking. But at the same time, I go back to that point about feeling like a bit of a hypocrite in a way, that because You know, I'm you know, me and a lot of people I know just don't have the safeguarding in place. They don't talk to the under 18s in terms of this stuff. So where else can they go? So maybe TikTok is a way for them to either start their journey or go with a trend for a while and give it up, or actually start down that whole rabbit hole. Maybe it is. Maybe some people will be like, this isn't enough. I need more. And they will do the research and they will do those things. Because I keep seeing, there were several videos on there actually that were like, pause and screenshot, like 10 tips for when starting out. And almost all of them looked identical in terms of research different parts, research crystals. But none of these videos actually tell you how to research.
Yeah.
And I don't actually think research is that easy when you break it down. There's a lot of aspects to it, you know, and I'm quite a methodical thinker. Like, I'm a Virgo like you are. And when I'm learning, like,
I figured you might be.
yeah. Yeah, when I'm learning something, I'm just like, right, I'm going to get 5 books at once, and I'm going to read a bit from that, a bit from that, a bit from that, and a bit from that, and I'm going to see how they intertwine, and I'm going to get this mood board up, and I'm going to draw all over that, and I'm going to write some notes in this book, and
Yep.
I'm just going to piece it all together. And
oh God, we've got 2 Virgos telling people how to learn.
it's naughty, isn't it? But yeah, like, so, and I would get frustrated even as a teenager watching a video that says research different paths. I'll be like, well, for a start, what are the paths, and how best do I go about researching these? You know, that's like if someone turned around and was like, oh, can you teach me how to be a carpenter? And I said, right, go and research different kinds of wood and learn how to use them.
Yeah.
That doesn't help, does it? It doesn't help.
No.
So all of these tips saying research this, research that, it's pointless, really.
Do you know what really struck me for that? That, like, this is so Virgo of you and me, but right, like, there was this thing a little while back, and it was talking about connect to your wild inner witch, and I was like, okay, how do we do that? Because there were so many posts about you get in touch with your wild self, connect back to your wild inner witch or wild woman or whatever it was, and I was like, and we do this how? To the point where the first course I ever wrote was that. I was like, right, so this has annoyed me so badly that I have created a course around it saying how I did it, if you would be interested in it from that perspective, because this is how I would connect to the inner wild and what that means to me, because it drove me up the wall. Like, there was some beautiful posts about it, some beautiful writing, like blog posts and essays around like the wild witch and what that meant, but it wasn't really like how to do that.
I think Thorn posted something about that the other day, actually, funny enough, because she was like things that even little things like how to use charcoal discs, I think, were in the video. Like, nobody tells you how to use one, really. You just have to kind of figure it out and not try and set your living room on fire. So, like, but there's too much that I see, and it might be a Virgo thing, maybe, but I feel like if you can't answer in-depth questions, or questions that might take you on a tangent, or actually turn around and tell people you don't know the answer, then maybe you shouldn't be putting yourself in a position where you're teaching. Because I'm more than happy to signpost to someone, do you know what, I don't practice that, I've no idea about it, like, but this could help, you know. Maybe you could, or talk to this person, they know more about that than me. And I'm also quite happy, like, and I posted a bit of a rant because I signpost people a lot, and that's not because I'm lazy, and it's not because I don't want to give you an answer, it's because I physically don't. There's a balance of, I can't do this answer justice in a DM because it's such an issue, and like, it's so huge. It's like somebody just randomly messaging you and be like, can you tell me how to use tarot? And you're like,
you pull cards, the end. No.
So like, and there's such open questions, but to them, innocently, and that's fine, innocently, that might seem like a really easy question, you know, because if you don't know about something, how do you know what's an in-depth question, what isn't? Because you haven't got started yet. But I've had backlash from people, like, in messages, if I say, right, you know, if you want to get started on, you know, with this green witch side of things, or the hedge witch side of things, or anything. I'm like, right, so here are some great authors. I'd recommend reading some of their stuff. You know, I might sometimes be like, I have a couple of friends who practice this. Feel free to follow their pages. But I'll keep it fairly brief. And people get a bit like, they get the hump with you, really, some of them, because they're like, well, can't you just tell me? And I'm like, no, it's not easy. It's not an easy answer. And then people will be like, oh, so you don't know the answer. I'm like, well, I do know the answer, but are you really expecting me to work within a character limit and spend the next 8 hours writing you message after message?
You just charge them for 8 hours of your time. There you go.
Yeah.
That definitely is a thing. I think that's why a lot of people go for ritual for hire and spells for hire and things, because ultimately it's not necessarily about learning the path, it's that they need or want an outcome. And I understand that, and I have no judgment about people who pay for readings, who pay for tarot rune readings, people who pay for spells and things. No judgment whatsoever. But we definitely live in an instant gratification culture, which I think social media has made a lot worse. Social media has some incredible benefits, and I operate almost entirely on social media for business and things, so I love social media, but at the same time there are definitely some pitfalls of it, and that reduced determination to follow through is definitely one thing. Like wanting everything right now because that's what the norm is in so many ways. Where you've always got something at your fingertips, you can always find something out instantly, you can always Google it, you can you can watch, and I love YouTube videos, I love all of that, but at the same time the trend now is to, as I said, to make really short videos, like bite-sized chunk videos, because people don't want to listen to an in-depth chat for an hour, and I'm like, I do. I would rather listen to the in-depth chat, that would give me more. But like you, I've made videos where I discuss some of the concepts that were a bit deeper and further along in my path, and I had people accuse me of lying about what I was talking about because they didn't understand it.
That is right. So the one thing that really gets my goat, and it does, because, and this is, we're going to have just like a Virgo cycle of rant upon rant now, aren't we? But right, so what bugs me quite a lot is when I think it's very disrespectful when I see people discredit someone's practice because they don't understand it, or they don't actually recognize that as a branch of witchcraft. And a good example of that from my memory to hand is when I was in Glastonbury once, before the Cat and Cauldron closed. Cat and Cauldron, one of my favorite shops. I'm sure you've been there.
Yeah, it's gone now for it was so sad.
And I think it was during one of the fairy festivals in the town hall, and I was in Cat and Cauldron because I love talking to the team there, and I am addicted to their oils. I love their oil blends. I get them all the time, and I use them in all kinds of workings. I think they're always really interesting. Everything from like deity oils all the way to like oils for specific intentions. And for those who don't know the shop, there's a lot of things like taxidermy, there's bones, there's a lot of traditional tools, there's a lot of things.
It's the strangest shop. It has some of the wackiest, well, it was, sadly it's gone now, but it had some of the wackiest, weirdest shit that you've ever seen. And some incredible books.
Oh yeah, there's some really good gems in there, book-wise there was, but there's a lot of tools in there that are very recognizable if you know about, say, like traditional folk magic, or grimoire magic, for example, older styles of traditional witchcraft. There's a lot of things in there that you could quite easily recognize, even if you don't practice that kind of path. You would expect someone, a practitioner, to be like, oh, I recognize that, you've seen that somewhere. And I was in the shop minding my own business, getting some oils, and two ladies walked in. I don't know how, I'm not sure how old they were. They were a bit younger than me. They sounded a bit like that woman you spoke about earlier with the pink wig. Because I remember distinctly they were both wearing wigs. One was pink and one was purple. And they walked in there and they looked frightened from the word go. And yeah, it is a bit of a creepy shop, I think, but I love it. But anyway, but they looked a bit frightened and they looked at each other and went, oh, I thought this was a witchcraft shop. And the other one's like, yeah, it says like Cat and Cauldron. It says witchcraft supplies on the outside, but I don't see anything to do with witchcraft in here. and they were like, yeah, this isn't witchcraft at all. Oh my God. And they just walked out. And I thought to myself, that's a problem. And that's a problem I keep seeing. That's a problem I keep seeing, even like, and this is especially within the community. You know, I keep seeing people trying to clarify stereotypes. You know, some people are like, well, witches don't worship the devil. You know, witches don't do this, witches don't do that. And I'm like, well, actually, some of them do. You know, some of them do that. Some of them do, you know, want to blast you over there, and they'll, you know, they won't hesitate to bind you or curse you. Some of these people, they do worship Lucifer or the devil or whatever incarnation or way that deity comes across, you know, in whatever traditions. And some people don't see that, and they think because, and it's especially to do with the things that I think had more to do with like shadow or like the dark or like the black magic kind of side of things. And people, practitioners discredit other practitioners because they don't know enough about the craft to recognize a different style of very valid witchcraft. And I can see that there's so many practitioners that don't practice like me at all. And, you know, I might not personally agree with the practice, so I might not like the practice. It's definitely not for me, but I can recognize them and fiercely respect them to be a practitioner of the craft, because I know, for example, how much dedication and knowledge you have to do certain practices within the craft. You know, and you only have to go to like the occult conference, you know, an occult conference to see this pure breadth of practitioners that we have under our huge umbrella. And they're all massively valid.
Yeah. There's also the thing that I think the reason that people often argue about what a real witch is, and that this is how I've come to understand why I think it happens, is people find what works for them, and then they decide that that's what works, full stop. And it's like, no, that's what works for you, and other people will have found what works for them, and it doesn't make it any less or more valid, whichever one that you're looking at. It's just personal experience. It's what fits you, and that is why, like, some of the if you're a Taurus, you're this kind of witch is really dangerous in a way, because it's kind of taking away all that personal experience, that personal perspective, that discovery, and then you do get people having arguments about, you're not a real witch because this, you're not a real witch because you practice differently to me. I love all kinds of, like, seeing all different kinds of witchcraft is one of the reasons I got on YouTube in the first place, because that interests me. I think it's interesting to see how different people practice, even if you're never going to practice that way. It's interesting to see how different people do things. And I've started going to moots. Well, I had started going to moots until the virus, and listening to people talk about different kinds of witchcraft. And a recent one was by a Romani, and that was fascinating because I had no real clue about how they practiced witchcraft, quote unquote. And some of the stuff in those talks is really interesting. So getting to hear other people talk about it is great. And I also think that's the antidote to it. That's the antidote to the that real witch argument, is to go listen to different people and just listen.
Yeah, I you know, I'm not ashamed to admit this. When I was at the conference, I've never been to a cult conference before in my life, any kind of thing. And I think I think there's a danger as well when you kind of are a bit like, you have the hereditary side of things as well, that you don't often look outside of your little box. And I've been doing my best for the last probably 9 years to look outside of my box and to research other things and find things. And I do think that I practiced much the same way for many years, and that's fine. I'm not angry at myself for doing that. But I was when I went to the conference, and I'd say that I'm fairly knowledgeable on the subject of witchcraft, having practiced it for 2 decades and more. But honestly, I was swimming in a sea of experience that was so beyond me. It just made me excited. I was thrilled. I was like, oh my God, I might know some of this someday. There were so many talks. I was like, I have no idea what that is. I'm going to sit here and listen. Oh my God, that's amazing. Or I know a bit about that. I wonder if there's any more. I tell you what, I went to a talk, and one of them was tangent alert. One of them was Christina Oakley, who runs Treadwell's bookshop in London. She did a talk, Women in Wicca, 1950 to 1970, and oh my God, it was fantastic, brilliant, really inspiring, and I learned so much that I didn't know about Wicca in that time. And at first I think some people discredited the talk because they're like, I don't really want to know about Wicca, or I know everything there is to know about Wicca. And I was like, I'm really interested in seeing this element, because it's a strong woman talking about other strong women that probably had some incredible struggles outside of Wicca, in a post-war Britain. And tell you what, changed my perspective on so many things. Brilliant. And that's not 15 seconds long. That talk was an hour and a half, maybe, keynote speaker. And that's the thing. I could have sat there for 8 hours and listened to her talk on the subject. And I think that, bringing it back to topic, that I would feel like I'm massively missing out if I wouldn't feel like satiated after a short video. I'd be like, but where's the rest?
That's us being Virgos again, though. You know
Maybe,
that, right?
Maybe.
This is not enough knowledge. We need more.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should probably wrap up there, because we've been talking a little bit longer.
It's 9:30 now.
And I need to go eat something.
You haven't had dinner?
No, I'm going now.
I was just about to say, actually, we didn't really talk about the curse side of things, but maybe another time.
I will invite you back, and we can talk about the curse stuff on a different video.
We'll call the video just a cycle of Virgos ranting.
Yeah. It feels like this could be like an ongoing series. 2 Virgos ranting.
What are we ranting about today?
So if you guys would like to see that, you can absolutely post down below, like, yes, please, I would love to see 2 Virgos ranting about the world.
Oh my God, that makes me really excited. Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming and talking today. It was mainly about WitchTok and different ways of experiencing witchcraft, I guess, in the end. So I'm just going to pop that over.